Good morning and welcome to this online meeting of the Corporate Parenting Panel. My name is Rachel Wilson and I am the Democratic Service Officer responsible for this meeting. This is a formal public meeting and the audio feed of this meeting is being broadcast via the County Council's website. Before we begin, I would like to confirm who is present this morning. When invited to speak, you should unmute your microphones and switch on your video. If I'm going to call everyone's names out and if you can just confirm that you're present. Councillor Brailsford.
Present.
Councillor Perrotton-Williams.
Present. Oh.
Councillor Folkes. Councillor Hakes.
Present.
Councillor Parkin, I believe we have apologies for. Councillor Trollope-Bellew.
Present.
Councillor Whittington.
Present. And
we have the following added members. Polly Coombs, I think we have apologies from Polly. Anne Wright.
Present.
Amy Louise Butler. And Elizabeth Bunny.
Present.
Thank you. We also have the following officers in attendance. These officers don't need to confirm their presence. We have Johnny Spencer, Assistant Director for Children's Safeguarding, Lisa Adams, Service Manager Barnardo's, Nicola Corby, Acting Principal Lawyer, Paul Fisher, Team Manager Quality and Standards, Ben Lilly, Team Manager Quality and Standards, Andrew Morris, Corporate Parenting Manager, Daniel Steele, Scrutiny Officer. Do I have any other officers present who I've not called out their names?
Yeah, good morning everybody. Rachel, Kieran Barnes, Head of the Virtual School.
Thank you.
And Yvonne Sherwood, Head of Service for Regulated South.
Thank you, Yvonne.
And Michelle Andrews, Head of Early Years.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll now move on to the formal agenda. Item 1 is election of chairman. Please, can I have nominations for chairman, please?
Can I nominate Councillor Brailsford, please?
Yeah. Is there a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second that.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Whittington.
Thank you. I'll now call out the name of each member present in alphabetical order and you are asked to state for, against or abstain. Councillor Hayes.
Definitely for.
Councillor Perrotton-Williams.
For.
Councillor Trollope-Bellew.
I think I'm going to go for.
Councillor Whittington.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman. Over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the members for that, electing me. It's a role I enjoy carrying out for the council, and I think this is the 8th year, possibly the final year I'll be doing it. But it sure will be one thing that I do miss when I'm no longer involved. So thanks to the members for that. Before I continue, when you did the roll call, Rachel, I didn't know whether Councillor Fuchs was in attendance. Can you confirm, please?
I don't believe he is.
Okay. I don't think he's given apologies, so he may well be arriving late.
He might still arrive late. Yeah.
Yes.
I'll keep an eye on that.
Right. Before we go to the second item, I would like to ask members of the committee and other participants to type speak in the chat when you wish to ask a question or make a contribution. Request to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman, which is coming up. It's the next item on the agenda. And I could ask members to keep your questions and contributions succinct and concise. Also, just a reminder, please turn off your camera and microphone when not participating in the meeting. So we'll now go back to the agenda And I think the next item is item 2, and that is the election of the vice chairman. And I would like to nominate Councillor Perrotton-Williams for that role, please. So do I have a seconder, please?
More than happy to second that, Chairman.
Thank you. Before we go to the vote, Rachel, I don't know, do I need to ask if there are any other nominations?
Yes, please.
Well, if no one wants to nominate, we will go straight to the formal vote. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah. Can I ask you to say for, against or abstain when I call your name out? Councillor Brailsford.
For.
Councillor Hakes.
For.
Councillor Trollope-Bellew.
For.
Councillor Whittington.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Well done. Congratulations, Cleo, and thank you very much for offering to be the Vice Chairman. Much appreciated. Moving on quickly to the next item, I'm going to go back to you, Rachel. Apologies for absence or replacement members.
Yes, we have received apologies from Councillor Parkin and Polly Coombs.
Thank you. Next item, item 4, declaration of members' interests. I will offer that to members, and remember that if you've declared the interest on your pecuniary interest form, you don't need to repeat it. But I'll pause for a moment and invite members who've got a declaration to make that known, please.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like just to make my regular declaration that my adopted son is currently in receipt of support from the Bernardo service, and they've done a fantastic job, and he's hopefully starting back at Rise Home College in September. But thanks to his efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Yes, that's the one that we normally receive from you, and it's good to hear there's some positive news coming there. And yeah, congratulations. On to the next item, item 5. Seems a long time ago, but we need to confirm the minutes of the last meeting. And the last meeting was the 12th of March. I think the world was slightly different then, wasn't it, if I recall? So this item 5, is to confirm the minutes of our previous meeting on the 12th of March as a correct record. Do we have a proposer and a seconder, please?
I'm happy to propose them. Sorry, Councillor Perrotton-Williams.
I'm happy to second that as well.
Thank you, councillors. I was giving you the opportunity to do that. I didn't want to do it myself, so thank you. Now, we're going to agree those unless anyone wishes to object. So if you have got any comments to make, any alterations, I will pause for a few seconds to allow you to write in the chat bar. So I'll just pause for a few seconds. Well, I'm going to, rightly or wrongly, presume that those minutes are correct, and thank you, and I'm going to say that those minutes are agreed. Thank you. Now, before we go to item 6, I'd just like to clarify, if Rachel could clarify, I normally, at the end of the meeting, sign the minutes. That's something that I'm going to have great difficulty doing, some 45, 50 miles away. So, do we have something in place now that will allow those minutes to be signed without me actually signing it? Can you explain what happens, please, Rachel?
Yes, if you give your permission, we will use your electronic signature to sign them.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Right. On we go to the next item, and thank you very much for that, members. The next item is dates of the future meetings. This item is for the panel to agree the meeting dates and times for 2021. It's shown on page 2 of the agenda pack. If you've not got the pack in front of you, I'll just read out those dates. Every date is on a Thursday, and we've got the 14th of January 2021, the 11th of March, again 2021, the 13th of May, and the 22nd of July. Now, I need to ask formally that these dates are approved, and if anyone dissents from those dates or would like to offer any advice, could you please indicate in the chat column, please? Again, I will pause. If no one objects, then we will agree those dates. Right, well, the silence is deafening, isn't it? So that's it, those dates are agreed. So we'll move on to item 7. And item 7, we get into the main part of the agenda now. Item 7, looked after children and care leaver strategy and action plan. This item is a review of the children in care and care leavers strategy and action plan. The strategy was written and agreed in 2018, and this is the second review of the action plan. The item will be presented by Andrew Morris, as you will know, is our corporate parenting manager. And again, just a reminder, if you would like to input on this item, please type speak into the chat thread, and we'll take questions to Andrew at the end of the report. Andrew, over to you, and good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, this is, well, it's the second and unfortunately it's going to be the final review of this children in care and care leaver strategies. It needs to be refreshed next year. I still can't believe it was written in 2018. It's due for refresh next year. It's a very large action plan, and I'll keep the presentation succinct. If people have got any questions, any particular areas, I might not be able to answer the questions straight away because of what I've done. I've drawn in a lot of information from a lot of aspects of children's services. Some of the officers present might be able to help with some of the answers. But what I will endeavour to do is, if there is a question raised I can't answer, I will go away, find the information out, and come back to the members. And I'll leave it there and take some questions and information comments about the final review of the action plan.
Thank you, Andrew. Apologies, I've muted my microphone, so apologies for that. Now, the report, as you say, goes from page 13 to page 44 of the agenda pack, and I'm going to ask Cleo, Vice Chairman, if there are any members wishing to ask any questions. Andrew, I'm sure there will be. So again, I'll just pause. Any responses, Cleo?
No one has indicated to speak.
I find that quite surprising. I will just pause a little bit longer, see if anyone does want to speak. Otherwise, Andrew, you've got away with a pretty good report there. I'll just give a few more seconds.
You were quite right, Chairman. Councillor Whittington has asked to speak.
Councillor Whittington, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. This is really just a point of clarification, really, from Andrew and from the team. Obviously, we have responsibility for looked after children who've passed through our social care system in the county. So I'm presuming that is for children who've been born in the county and been adopted in the county. So just a thought occurred to me: how do we suppose a child is adopted in another part of the country and then comes to live in Lincolnshire? I know that. How does the funding work for that, or any of the services we provide? Are we notified? So, say if someone comes up from, I don't know, Southampton, just top of the head, child's been adopted in Southampton, The family moved up to Lincolnshire. I guess all the paperwork is down in Southampton. Would they then let us know in Lincolnshire that child is here, and how will that child access services? It's just a point of clarification, really. Thank you.
Do you want me to answer that, Andy?
Yeah, well, there's two bits in that, isn't there? Yeah, you go ahead, Janice, with the adoption and the lack bit.
Okay, so Councillor Whittington, what happens is if the child is adopted in Southampton and the family moved to Lincolnshire, there's no legal obligation for us to be notified by anybody. If the child resides in Lincolnshire over a 3-year period, then adoption support will be provided by Lincolnshire. Within the 3-year period, we can go back to the placing authority to seek support from them. If the child is not adopted but placed for adoption and the family moved to Lincolnshire, then they have to notify us. And again, the same rules apply. For example, we have a family that's in Lincolnshire and a child comes from another authority to be placed with a Lincolnshire family, the responsibility remains with Lincolnshire. So there's kind of little different approaches depending on the circumstances of the situation.
Yeah, I understand.
But predominantly, once the child is resident in Lincolnshire, it will be our responsibility.
Yeah, all right, that's fine. It's just really a point of clarification, and it also helps me with a piece of casework I have at the moment, where I've got a adopted child residing with a family in my area, but the adoption actually happened down in London, and I'm just but I may need to speak with you about that, Janice, when I get more information. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just come back to me when you need to.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Did you want to add any more to that, Andrew, or not?
No, that's fine. The assistant director covered it for me.
As I expected she would. Yes. Okay. Well,
it's a tricky area, adoption.
I think the only thing I would say, Councillor Brailsford, is that next year I'll be looking at pulling a group of people together, including elected members, officers and partners, to review the strategy and look at new children in care and care leaver strategy for the next 3 years. And I'd welcome members and officers' input into that, and I'll be no doubt liaising with Janice and John Harris about how we're going to go about that over the coming months.
Actually, if I may,
is now joining.
Chairman, I mean, I think the thing is, the actual report is so good that it actually answers an awful lot of questions. It sort of states the objectives and how they're being achieved. The only thing potentially which might be useful for us, because obviously it's great at the moment that we've got loads of greens and ambers and no red, which is fantastic. But I'm just wondering if it's possible in the column where there's colours, if it's amber, if it's possible to give an estimated date for when you hope it goes green. Would that be potentially useful if that is possible, Andrew?
I think it's the ones where it's remained amber. It's probably because it's an open-ended piece of work, and I think to say green is absolutely achieved, I don't think many things are always absolutely achieved. I think sometimes if you've got a particular team or structure to set up, you can set a team or structure up, but the outcome of that team or structure is just going to be ongoing. So I think we'd love to have everything green, but I think sometimes it's good to keep it amber just to show that it is an open-ended activity.
I think okay, that's fine. That answers that. Thank you much indeed. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, Cleo, before we end this item, are there any other councillors wishing to speak, please?
No, there is no other councillors indicating they wish to speak.
Okay, thank you. I propose that then that we receive the progress against the priorities and note that the point of clarification has been answered by Janice Spencer. And as members, we do look forward, Andrew, next year to become involved in reviewing the strategy. It's something that I know that myself and many others of this panel would like to get involved in. So if we don't have anyone who dissents, I'm going to say that this item is agreed and received.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Right, moving on. Next item on the agenda, Andrew. I gather you're leaving the meeting now, Andrew. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you very much for the report. And I do agree, it was really positive news. Right, moving on. Item 8 is the Leaving Care Service annual report. This item is the annual report relating to the work undertaken on behalf of Lincolnshire Leaving Care Service by Barnardo's. I've lost my notes, but Lisa, I think, am I correct in thinking that you're going to present this report?
Chairman, there's been a message in the chat saying that Lisa Adams and Kerry M are struggling to access the meeting, and they're obviously the people who are presenting the report for the board.
Right. So,
Chairman, we have actually they have actually been able to connect using the mobile phones. They are in the meeting, but they do appear to be muted. So I'm not sure if they can hear us. They just need to unmute themselves so they can speak. So they are showing in the chat as having joined using their mobile phones.
Right. Well,
I believe that you can hear me now.
We can, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. So,
right.
So it's Lisa Adams here.
Lisa, did you hear the introduction that I gave? Are you able to proceed to give this report to the panel, please?
I am Councillor Brailsford. Yes, I did hear your introduction. So I'll move on and present the annual report for Lincolnshire Leaving Care. The report for last year basically was the last year under the current the contract that we were working to, which was to work with care leavers aged 18 to 25. So in the report, I've tried to move through areas looking at suitable and safe accommodation, education, employment and training, complaints and compliments, and also just a little bit about the new leaving care contract. We continue to meet monthly with commissioners from Lincolnshire County Council and obviously track our performance sort of over a monthly basis, really. As far as access and maintaining safe accommodation, we provide details down to individual cases, really, where if we do have any concerns about unsuitable accommodation, we provide a narrative around those particular young people. And again, obviously seek to look at a resolution for any issues like that. Currently, we don't have any young people accessing bed and breakfast accommodation paid for by the local authority, but we do have some young people who are being assessed. Their housing needs are being assessed, but their bed and breakfast is being paid for by local district councils. So we obviously keep a very close eye on them. We do have still have some specialist officers who deal with accommodation. We have a specialist accommodation officer, and we also run our supported lodging scheme as well. Within the report, I've obviously put some statistical information relating to our supported lodgings provision and the placements that were made throughout last year. So we received 52 referrals for the scheme, and we matched that with 23 providers. So we actually provided 35 placements over the year. Supported lodgings workers will work and providers will work with 16 and 17-year-old homeless young people, and they will also provide a rent-a-room facility for young people up to 21, really. We've also got some examples where, as young people have reached 21, they have chosen to stay with their supported lodgings provider and just have continued to pay that on a rent-a-room basis. It's a very successful scheme, and I know that the corporate parenting manager and commissioners are very aware of, individual cases As far as it's an offer in a way that's made in relation to a number of housing options that we can look at for care leavers. And again, the housing strategy that the corporate parenting manager has oversight for, it feels like that this is one of the elements that can be considered when trying to match a young person. Like I said, we've had some really, really good results from using this type of provision, where some young people who've been in had self-harming, had struggled to maintain education, have really, really been able to come on, improve their independent skills, and have achieved beyond what we wanted, really. So they've done really, really well in this provision. Obviously, through lockdown, since towards the end of the financial year, we did have to put on hold some of the providers just because of their own health needs and them requiring to shield. But again, if a young person did move to alternative accommodation, we still kept that link with the supported lodgings provider and still do up to this period. Moving on and looking at employment and training opportunities, again, regionally, Lincolnshire continue to do well regionally, although the figure, like you said, can always be improved. We very much try and take a very targeted approach with young people in relation to EAT, because one rule fits all just does not work for young people. So even a piece of work at the moment I can talk to you about is where we are literally going through every young person with every leaving care worker and having a look at what their situation is, how we could help to improve that, how we can use the offers that are currently available with job centres to absolutely try and target and be very aspirational about young people working and being able to do that. We've obviously have got a cohort of unaccompanied asylum seekers, which is quite a large cohort in care leavers. And again, some of them are unable to work, but that doesn't mean that they are unable to gain education and look at education whilst their assessment is going through their immigration assessment. So we do that. Just a point of clarity, where I have talked about the Care Leaders Apprenticeship Scheme, there is a mistake in the report, and I've talked about a partnership that we're doing currently with Siemens, and it's actually Serco. So I do apologise for that. That will need correcting for the minutes. So myself and the corporate parenting manager since the beginning of this year have been doing a piece of work with Serco, where they are looking to provide opportunities specifically for Lincolnshire care leavers. So again, that mentorship programme, potentially looking at some interviewing skills for young people, is moving forward. And it feels like quite a strong collaboration that we've got at the moment with Serco. So that feels very positive as well. Just moving on to complaints and compliments, really. We do monitor this in service. We don't have a particularly high number. The complaints that are currently outstanding aren't in relation to actually young people, but actually in relation to a provider. So, there aren't any outstanding complaints from young people at the moment. And then what I've done towards the end of the report is just try and build on some of the success stories that we've had over the last financial year, really. We try very hard to keep the profile of Lincolnshire Leaving Care both regionally and nationally. The Leaving Care Service was awarded nationally a Chief Executive Award through Barnardo's for their services to care leavers, which was great. We've also done some pieces of work for national newsletters. We've done some media work with local papers about our supported lodging schemes. I've tried to capture as well just the voice of the young person in a couple of the examples that I've given you, where they've talked about the service that they've had when they've been on the Care Leaders Apprenticeship Scheme as well. And also, like I said, the transcript of the telephone call from an older care leaver, a 29-year-old. And what I also know is that the corporate parenting manager has also had a discussion with an ex-care leaver from Lincolnshire, again, who has done incredibly well in her life, has achieved very well, and was really keen to sort of share that really with Lincolnshire, and sort of thank Lincolnshire really for the opportunities that she had. And so just to conclude, just I guess a little bit about the new service specification. So we did put in a bid for the new leaving care contract, slightly larger contract than we've delivered previously, where we're looking to deliver a service for 16 to 25-year-olds. So that means that leaving care workers can absolutely come on board with your children in care teams and start to work with some young people from age 16. We've also introduced a new post into the service, which is a new project worker post who will concentrate on group participation for the service, because it's something that, although at the moment can feel a bit difficult, is something that we absolutely want to move forward on. And we're just in the process at the moment of developing a Facebook page, some social media for our care leavers, and more opportunities to do some sort of work together as a whole service. So that post at the moment is out for adverts, but there is somebody covering that, and has been somebody covering that on an interim basis since April. And like I said, we've also increased the number of leaving care workers, so to be able to take on that extra work for 16 to 25-year-olds. We see the profile of young people changing from approximately 350, 360 to probably up to about 500 young people that the service will be working with. Statutory work with the 16 to 18-year-olds will still remain with the children in care teams, but we will hopefully be a really good addition to that service to be able to, like I said, do some of the transition work and really help young people move towards adulthood. So that's it in relation to this annual report from the Leaving Care Service.
We can't hear you, Chairman. We still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
That's it, yeah.
Right, okay, third attempt, probably get it right this time. Lisa, thank you very much for coming online. I gather you've had some problems accessing the meeting, so really delighted that you could join us this morning. Yes, this link between in care and leaving care is absolutely vital, and delighted that the contract's been slightly extended, and it looks as though you're doing a pretty good job. Now, I'm going to invite members who wish to speak to do the normal and type speak in the chat bar. But while we're doing that, I'm going to ask Lisa a question. The page of the agenda is mentioned there somewhere. I can't tell you which page it is, but we've got a graduation ceremony coming up. I hope that someone's going to be supporting that person at that graduation. Are you able to confirm that? And you mentioned the error between Siemens and Serco on the apprenticeship programme, and yes, we will correct that. But wouldn't it be nice if we could have both on side with that, and that would increase hopefully the number of apprenticeships. But I'm now going to go to the Vice Chairman and see if there are any members wishing to ask questions. Over to you, Cleo.
We've got Councillor Whittington has indicated to speak, and I would like to make a comment after he has spoken.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Lisa, for a very positive report. It's really gratifying, especially when you sort of look at the stories of those care leavers who are sort of making progress, and and the feedback that's received, and it's really good as well to see that you're developing apprenticeship opportunities with Serco. But obviously, of course, when you referred to the actual misprint and Siemens, the question sort of popped into my mind. If the sort of model of developing apprenticeships with Serco is successful, would you say look to sort of maybe approaching large companies in Lincolnshire like Siemens plus other large employers in the county? And I'm thinking here not just in the private sector, but in the public sector as well, and also the third sector, to see if there's a possibility of developing apprenticeship opportunities for our care leavers there. The second question is in terms of housing and working with local authorities, especially the districts. So just if you give us a bit of feedback as to, around that, how supportive you find the district councils are, because there are a number of us county councillors who are also district councillors as well. So if there are any districts that potentially are, I'm not saying on doing their being responsible, but maybe there's a few issues. If there's any sort of thing that potentially some of those of us who are district councillors might be able to sort of help out with. Fourth one is on supported housing, and this is with sort of care leavers who go in to private rented. Just as a bit of clarity around, do we do any checks of the places that they're being placed into and the landlords? Because obviously the last thing we want to do is to put them in with use the expression rogue landlord. So hopefully we know they're going into good quality accommodation with supportive or understanding landlords. And the third question, the final question, which I guess, because obviously the report goes up until the end of March 2020, and obviously we didn't go into COVID lockdown until the middle of March. So I know you'd be reporting on the impact of COVID on the service in the next report, which we won't receive until obviously this time next year. But if you just give a little bit of information as to what impact COVID's having in terms of your ability to support our care leavers, and if there are any issues around housing and accessing education stuff that's been caused by the present COVID situation, just to give us a little bit of reassurance, because obviously, as I said, it will be a year before we actually see the official report into this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully I've got all of those, but please come back to me if I've missed something off. First of all, I guess just going back to Chair's question about are we attending things and are we trying to get to graduations and things like that? Yes, we are. We've done all sorts of support even in lockdown in relation to attending with young people or trying to support them if they have had to attend events, if they've been able to. So a very sad but a very good example is where a young person whose foster carer died, and there was a funeral, and it was at the stage, quite at the early stage of lockdown, where incredibly limited number of people could go to funerals. But we supported that young person. She did attend the funeral. So although we couldn't be involved in transporting, what we could do is offer telephone support both prior to and immediately after attending the event. We liaised with the family to make sure it was okay for that young person to go to the funeral. So we are still trying virtually to do that support. We've had one of our young people is due to do her last day at work on her apprenticeship scheme. And again, so Helen Tomlinson has actually been out and seen that young person when she finished work and did a social distance visiting after that. So we are we are absolutely still trying to support young people. And like I said, and that's been made easier recently, but I'll come on to COVID. In relation to the apprenticeships and the ability to source apprenticeships, all apprentices through a care leavers are actually employed by Lincolnshire County Council. That is actually the employer, and then they are going out. So there is a budget issue, which Yvonne may want to come in on, as in relation to how many young people we can go through the apprenticeship scheme. But generally that's been working out at about 10 young people. We have found opportunities both within the council but also within private enterprises as well to be able to host apprentices. So we had one of our young people at Mercedes who went into their apprenticeship scheme at Mercedes, did incredibly well with that programme, and ended up, like I said, getting a national award from Mercedes for that. So so yes, we still are able to source different types of apprenticeships. I guess the next thing for us would be, what about hosting an apprentice within leaving care? And whilst that can come with some issues, it would certainly wouldn't be something that we wouldn't potentially consider. Then just having a look at district councils and housing. What I would say is that the corporate parenting manager has clearly done an awful lot of work with district councils and put that policy together, which is about care leavers being able to bid on properties, not having to identify a particular, have that local connection, as long as they have a connection with, obviously, with Lincolnshire. What I would say is that some of the local authorities, some of the district councils, because they are used to, they have more of a turnover of care leavers, are absolutely on the ball with this and work incredibly well. We have had some individual cases, but what I would say is that the corporate parenting manager has then been able to get involved. That's how we tend to do it, that I will raise the issue with the corporate parenting manager, and the corporate parenting manager will go to the lead housing officer within the district council. And that generally has meant that we have been able to unpick difficult situations. We did have a particularly difficult, challenging case with an unaccompanied asylum seeker where the district council was just a bit got a bit confused about their status, but like I said, with some input from us, we were able to resolve that. So I think, as the corporate parenting manager has said previously, really strategically, it's very good because that policy is in place. There's sign off from all 7 district councils. Just sometimes operationally, we need to get involved and we need a bit more sort of one-to-one work. But what I would say is that generally we've been able to achieve that. So, you know, we wouldn't in a way need any of the councillors to advocate on our behalf. But what I would say is, like I said, there has been a really good response when we've looked at individual cases. You then just asked me about private rented and about landlords. What I would say there is that obviously private rented is an option for a care leaver to look at. We do get involved. We do try and, you know, look at the tenancy. We try and talk about what sort of a license agreement the young person is signing up to. And whilst we can't stop them signing up to that agreement, we will, like I said, try and have a look and make a decision about if we think that's a good quality provision for them to be renting from. So we do get involved, and like I said, we either that's through the leaving care worker or the specialist accommodation worker. And then just with the COVID update, I mean, I've got lots of examples where I think Bernardo's have actually done exceptionally well with care leavers from Lincolnshire. We made immediate contact as soon as we moved into lockdown. We immediately issued additional funding for care leavers that was provided from Bernardo's. We have since then been successful in bringing in an additional £13,000 worth of funding into Lincolnshire to deal with sort of social isolation. So we've been involved in purchasing some additional laptops for care leavers who haven't met the government scheme. We've provided data bundles, we've provided some mobile phones, we've provided some, we've done some social media access for them. We're keeping in much regular contact than we need to, as far as what the statutory contact needs to be. We're in much regular contact, and the management oversight of that is also very clear. When you look at Mosaic and you look at how much time we are contacting, you can see the management oversight of that as well. Like I said, we've had this new participation worker in, so again, we've sort of done some surveys with young people. We've moved that on since the beginning of lockdown, and certainly what we've also done, and like I said, which we've shared with commissioners, is we record all of the face-to-face contact and have done since the start of lockdown. So what you can see is that increase really, as government guidance has changed, you can see that increase in how we are doing an awful lot more face-to-face contact with care leavers. At the moment, we're just now issuing the PPE equipment for care leavers, because we're looking to sorry, we just think as a good corporate parent, because we've now got the new advice about PPE being worn in shops and things, that we should actually be supporting care leavers in wearing that PPE equipment. So we're just doing that at the moment as well. So that's sort of I hope a whistle-stop tour. If I've missed anything out, please let me know.
Thank you, Lisa. That was, I think you've covered everything. It's very informative, and I'm really pleased with the positive news that regarding the extra funding and it's being used to, support the care leavers with laptops and phones and things, because obviously if they're not able to afford one themselves, it does enable them, if they've got a laptop or a mobile phone, to be able to have online support with their with your service. I think that's a really positive piece of news, and thanks for that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Lisa, thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, over to you, Cleo, I think now.
It was just a comment to say that I really liked the fact you put examples into the report, and I like seeing them, basically. So keep it up.
That's great. Thank you.
Is that all, Cleo? You don't have any more?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much for that. And I think you gave more than an annual report. You gave a little bit of an insight into what's happened since lockdown came in. I think at the last meeting we had on the 12th of March, it would have mentioned social isolation, then would have wondered what it meant. That we've got, sadly, we've got quite used to it. But again, very pleased with the response you've given to Councillor Whittington, and yeah, a really sad case with the funeral. I think heart goes out there to all those involved. It was quite a tragic case. Just got one question, if I can come back to you, Lisa, on that. On the apprenticeship numbers, you raised the question of a budget issue. Now, that's not something that this panel can have a great input on, but it's something I'd like to know. You mentioned that there was 10 young people on the scheme. Is that scheme limited to 10? And if we wanted to increase it, would it be a budget pressure, please?
I think it may be that Yvonne needs to sort of answer that question, really, because she's obviously budget holder for the local authority. But what I would say is that Lincolnshire County Council have always been very aspirational in relation to if young people are able to meet the criteria for doing an apprenticeship, then they have been supported in doing that. So I wouldn't want to go away from this call thinking that it is about numbers and it is about, and that we have been stopped from doing that. Lincolnshire have always, like I said, been really supportive of doing that. And like I said, the issue really is about the sort of the educational attainment to actually be able to do an apprenticeship is fairly high. So if we had individual cases where we thought we would be over those numbers, we would be speaking to the local authority, and I'm sure that they would be more than happy to listen to that.
Thank you, Lisa. That you pointed me in the right direction. Thank you very much for that.
Chairman,
yes.
Yvonne has asked if she can speak on the issue of apprenticeships.
Delighted. Yes.
Yes, it was just really to clarify some of the information that Lisa's given to you. We have sufficient funding which is in place for up to 10 young people to engage in an apprenticeship, 10 care leavers to engage in an apprenticeship. We don't tend to reach the full number. I think on the 1 year that we did, there was a request that went to DLT to increase the budget for it, and that was given without a moment's hesitation, in effect. So I think we strive to get as many young people as we can on it. We don't always get sufficient young people on it to meet to fulfil the budget. But if we were over numbers, then I would certainly be more than happy to approach the director leadership team in order to increase that funding. Does that address that issue?
Yes, it does, Yvonne, and thank you very much for that information. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've been invited to review the annual report and performance of the Leaving Care Service and any recommendations for future consideration. I think we've done that. So I'm going to propose that we receive the report and note the items mentioned by Councillor Whittington and Councillor Perrotton-Williams. And I'm going to just pause for a few seconds to give anyone the opportunity who dissents. Otherwise, we're going to agree that report. So I will just pause for a few moments, and if there's no one indicates, we will move on to the next item of the agenda. So that is agreed, and we'll move on to item 9. And item 9 is, when I can find it, just bear with me, please. Oh, yes, it's the V4C update report. It's to receive a report by Ben Lilly. Sorry.
Is now exiting.
Well, thanks for that. I'll carry on. Item 9 on the agenda, V4C update report, to receive a report by Ben Lilly, Team Manager Quality and Standards, which gives a summary and overview of the activities of V4C between January and June this year. Ben, over to you, and good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, as Councillor Brailsford said, this report goes back to the beginning of January to capture some information not previously reported to the Corporate Parenting Panel. And I've split the report into 2 sections, a January to March and then March to June.
Yeah.
So January to March gives us a summary of the period of time when we were still undertaking physical meetings and sessions with the children and young people. And the report shows that we've had meetings with a variety of activities and venues, including bowling, climbing, escape rooms, music workshops at the showroom, and the North Sea Observatory, which was a chocolate workshop, which for the first time, I believe, put East Lindsey's figures into double figures at the chocolate workshop. So a popular activity. Attendances are up and down in terms of activities, but I think what the figures show is that when the sessions are run in external venues with good activities, then the children and young people are certainly turning up, and it is meaning that we are consistently having sessions running across all 4 of the locality areas. The report then talks about how V4C has worked since the lockdown in March, and in common with many other activities, V4C has been utilising Zoom. So over April, we did quite a lot of work to establish the groups through using Zoom, and we have groups happening in sessions happening in each of the localities in terms of Lincoln and West Lindsey, where we're up to 11 people attending, and they're trying as much as possible to do fun activities within these sessions. We have Boston and South Holland averaging 7 young people, and then North and South Kesteven and East Lindsey 5 to 6 young people. We've had to deal with some staff redeployment issues in those localities, so we've had different youth workers involved. So the Zoom meetings are going forward, and what we're looking at alongside the V4C meetings is some sessions with Soundlinks. So we're planning to start in the week after next a 12-week session covering different musical activities for the groups, and these are going to be around some digital music which can be done without instruments, but we're also looking at purchasing some ukuleles and having some ukulele tutorials. The reason for ukuleles is they're relatively quite cheap and inexpensive to purchase, relatively easy to start playing and are quite small, so they don't take up much storage space. So we're working with Soundlinks to sort that out at the moment. The report also talks about quite a lot of communications we've undertaken in terms of raising the profile of V4C at this time, in terms of doing virtual newsletters, briefings, internal comms. We've got stuff on Facebook and foster care news bulletins. So we're hoping the Zoom virtual meetings will continue even when we're in a position to hopefully move back to face-to-face physical sessions, because we're finding that a number of young people really enjoy these types of virtual activities, and compared to attending a physical session, and vice versa, there's other young people who are not so comfortable with remote technology and prefer a physical session. So we're hoping going forward that we can meet both of those needs really. So work to be done to continue to develop our virtual V4C work and offers. But I want to feedback that a lot of hard work has got into the virtual work via the Future for Me youth and community development workers and the participation officers.
Thank you, Ben. Right. Yeah. Well, before I ask members who wish to speak, I'm just going to say that indicate in the normal way. I've got some questions, but I'll open it up first of all to members. If anyone wants to speak, indicate to Councillor Harrison Williams. Cleo, anyone wishing to speak?
Councillor Whittington has asked to speak.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks. And the report is very good, and it's pleased to see that lockdown hasn't totally stopped all the activities, and actually you're finding new ways of keeping the young people in contact. I'm just wondering, just a couple of points. I know there are some people who find Zoom meetings and virtual meetings quite difficult. And I think it comes down because I know a lot of people quite like in face to face. You can make eye contact and you can judge other people's responses a lot better than potentially you can via Zoom. I particularly have a stammer, which is exacerbated by virtual meetings, because I react a lot better to face to face and seeing people's reactions. So I would imagine that the young people who potentially going to find that different and very, very challenging. So I'm just wondering, what we can do to sort of help to encourage them to come out from their shells a little bit and have the confidence to sort of embrace the technology. Because I'm kind of getting the impression that obviously it'd be great when you can get back to having proper physical activities, but actually the Zoom meetings might actually, in between the regular physical activities going forward, might provide a drop-in type of approach, so that the young people themselves could possibly have have a virtual in between the physical meetings, so they can develop friendships and relationships that way. And I'm also thinking that potentially, with Zoom, you've got the ability for all of the young people, no matter where they live in the county, to kind of participate in one grand Zoom meeting, so they build relationships with other people in different parts of the county. So really, just sort of going forward, your thoughts on what you think the model is going to be going forward, and I suspect, and hopefully, I'm hoping you're going to say it's going to be a hybrid between physical and online and virtual. And then my other point is a point I ask to every meeting I attend where virtual is being discussed. What, obviously, in order to be able to do virtual meetings, you need the technology, whether it's a mobile phone or a laptop or a tablet. I'm just wondering, are we able to give support to those young people who may not have access to technology to provide the equipment that they need to be able to engage? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, can I answer those? Yeah. First of all, in terms of a hybrid model, I think that's exactly what I think we want for all the reasons you've said, really. There's children, young people who really enjoy physical meetings, and others who would prefer the option of a Zoom meeting. And certainly in an area like a county like Lincolnshire, it gives us the opportunity to reach more children, young people, to get their participation and engagement. So we really do foresee the best of both worlds with that, and having that hybrid model. In terms of you asked the councillor about developing and supporting children and people in terms of the confidence of using platforms such as Zoom. We very much see V4C as a vehicle for developing children and young people and helping them with their confidence. So I know that one of the youth workers has very much been supporting children to do that by getting them to meet in smaller groups rather than coming into a full group. So that is part of a young person's sort of journey, participating journey to kind of develop their confidence in that way. So I hope that answers the question. In terms of the mobiles and getting access to people with technology, I think in certain instances we've had children and young people use their parents' phones when they haven't got their own. But we would like to obviously try and address any issues that on an individual basis, if somebody doesn't have access, then we would look at trying to sort that out.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Yes, that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cleo. Anyone else wishing to speak, Cleo?
Sorry, no one has else has indicated to speak.
Okay, well, I've got a slight technical problem at this end, but I'll try and continue. Ben, I've got a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do we actually contact those young people who do not participate in V4C and to make inquiries as to why that is? And when we do the external activities, and hopefully we're going to get back to that pretty soon, most unfortunate that we've had to postpone them, obviously. Do we actually choose those activities in conjunction with the young people, please?
Okay, yeah, okay, I'll answer both of those as best I can. In terms of contacting those who don't attend, we don't kind of phone every single, we can't phone every single child, young people. But when we've got some that are due to attend and then they don't, we do try to contact those to find out the reasons for it. And it's often not because they haven't wanted to attend, it's like they've had other things that they've had to do. So so we do try and do that when we can. Sorry, still there?
Yeah. Yes, I'm not going to wait.
Yeah. So we do try and contact those who we expect to attend and then don't. And sometimes it's like a last minute problem with transport or travel in the past. So there's that. So what was your second point, David? Your second question was about.
Do the young people choose the activities, external activities?
Right, yeah. I think they do, but I think sometimes they're led. I'm not sure, but I think sometimes they may be led by the workers. So we sometimes found like the outdoor activities that have been organised for like November and February, for example. They get organised and the bookings are low, and that's because of the weather. So I'm very keen that, like I've put in the report, that the V4C sessions really do need to be led by the children and young people in terms of where they're held and the activity. So that is something we will really make sure that's the case, because clearly attendances, when we get the activity in the venue correct, the evidence is now there, I think, that the attendances are good. Better.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Yes, I think we realised that the figures were quite low about a year ago, but we did see quite a dramatic increase, which was quite positive, and I'd like to continue in that vein. And I just wonder if young people, for instance, think it would be a good idea to have a barbecue on the beach or something like that.
Yes, that's the kind of
that's the sort of things that I was thinking.
I certainly think if you get good food involved, it kind of it seems like it helps. I think the chocolate one at the North Sea Factory is a good North Sea Observatory is a good example of that.
Yes, I'm sure Janice Spencer would be interested in that as well, but perhaps it's change the diet slightly. Right, well, thanks for that. Claire, are there any other councillors wishing to speak?
No, no one else has indicated to speak. I think, David, sorry, Chairman, the general, from my perspective, is that the reports are so well written. So, like Councillor Whittington said earlier, when you have questions, they get answered when you've read the rest of the report. So I think that's probably why we're all being a bit quiet.
Yes, I find the reports have always been very thorough, but I've noted, particularly since since we've been on this lockdown, I don't know why it is that they seem to be they've always been thorough, but they've been given details and quite quite good information. So it does limit the questions that we can ask, because they're already mentioned in the report. But anyway, to continue, Ben, thank you very much for that. Now, members, sorry, Ben, did you want to come in?
I'm okay to leave the meeting now. It was said earlier, was it? Yeah.
Yes, if that's the last one you're going to do. Yeah. Yes, you are. Okay. Thanks very much. And yeah, well done. Congratulations.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Bye. So members,
is now exiting.
Members, we are invited to provide comment and steer on regarding the V4C activities, which I believe we have done. And I'm going to propose that we receive the report and note the comments made by members. I'm going to pause slightly, and if there's no dissent in the chat column, I'm going to take it that that item is agreed. Right, we'll move on. That item is agreed. Thank you very much, Ben. Yeah, okay. Over to item 10, legal services. This is item 10 agenda. Legal services, Lincolnshire end of year report 2019-2020. That's from April 19 to March 20. I've probably got this wrong, but I've got Nicola Corbett down to present that.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yes, I'm looking up at the screen. It is correct, yes. Nicola, you're the acting principal lawyer, and you're going to provide the panel with the opportunity to consider the legal services end of year report. And again, a reminder to members, if you've got any questions, they'll be taken at the end of the report, and indicate you wish to comment in the normal way. Okay, over to you, Nicola.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, clearly this is the annual report from Legal Services, so it's done in a very, I hope, thorough and complex way to explain to you what the position has been regarding the legal proceedings concerning children in Lincolnshire. In terms of the headlines, really, we've seen a slight decrease in the number of care proceedings issued over the last reporting period. But I think it's fair to say that that's unlikely to remain the case going forward. I can tell you that in terms of raw data alone, the team is currently holding 136 live applications as at this point in time. Insofar as the outcome for children of Lincolnshire are concerned, there has been a rise in supervision orders being granted. These are orders where effectively is provided by the local authority, mostly to families, under the legal principle of advise, assist and befriend the families. So what that means in broad terms is that children have effectively been returned to their families and are largely going to be cared for by their parents. And that, of course, has a direct correlation in terms of other outcomes, because you will see that there has been a decline in special guardianship orders, and there's also been a decline in placement orders. So they're the headlines really in terms of the legal report. It's fair to say that going forward, you will know from other meetings and information that's been given by legal services that under the COVID-19 pandemic, the family courts have continued to function and operate. Myself and Janice Spencer, the Assistant Director of Children's Services, and the designated family judge for the Lincoln Court, Honor Judge Clark, have regular meetings. So we look at how cases are being tracked forward. There has been a considerable amount of work done to maintain the progression of cases in the court, particularly recently regarding getting some hubs organised. These are places where Lincolnshire has provided rooms within contact centres for parents and their legal representatives to access, and that allows them to access to equipment and Wi-Fi and provides them the ability to give evidence within court, because of course they've not been able to attend the court building itself. So we hope that that will continue to be successful and obviously continue to conclude cases during this current period.
Thank you, Nicola. Yep, is that that's the end of your summary, is it?
It is, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Cleo, any members wishing to ask any questions, please?
Councillor Whittington has indicated he would like to speak.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Nicola, for the report. I actually typed "speak, please," and I may have jumped the gun because I was going to ask you about the impact of COVID on the progress of cases through the court, but you cover that with your last few comments on it. Because I did sort of kind of notice that on the graph on page what is it, page 7, you can actually see that the number of proceedings concluded, taking a bit of a dive there. I just wondering, I mean, I know that only goes up to March 20, but I was just wondering why that was, if that potentially was impacted by COVID. And if it was, and a backlog's been created, what work's being done to ease the backlog? Because I know, as somebody who's been through the adoption process, from personal experience, when you get a court date, you have to kind of prepare. We had to prepare our adopted son quite a bit in advance to kind of lead up to it. It's a very important day and stuff like that. I'm just wondering, because I think it's important that, the children involved in the process are kind of kept in the loop. And I'm just so hopefully the expectations aren't being built up that this is their court date, and then unfortunately it slips because of issues in the court system. But I'm pleased with the comments you made that there's regular meetings taking place to progress these cases through. So that's really all I had to say on that. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else wishing to speak, Cleo?
No one else has indicated that they wish to speak.
Okay, thank you. Yes, again, Nicola, thank you for that report. We've been invited to consider the legal services end of year report and highlight any recommendations for future consideration. I think the report, as we've mentioned earlier, like all the reports, are extremely thorough, and I'm going to propose that we receive the report, and unless anyone dissents, I will pause for a few seconds, and if to allow anyone to dissent if they need to. So I'll just pause for a moment. It's all quiet, Cleo, so thank you, and we receive that report. And Nicola, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. May I leave the meeting, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, yes, you may. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Moving on to the next item of the agenda, it's the Independent Reviewing Service Annual Report 2019-2020. This report introduces the annual report of the Independent Reviewing Service, and the report will be introduced, by Paul Fisher, the Team Manager of Quality and Standards. Obviously, members will be invited to comment, and if they would do so in the normal way, and we'll take questions at the end. So, yes, Paul, good morning, and it's over to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone else. Obviously, I'm stepping in for Carolyn Knight to present this report today. What I've done is I've just pulled together some of the elements that's been going well and some of the challenges from the reports. So looking at the, obviously the report covers the priorities from 1920 and 20 to 21 and finishes in 2021 rather. So looking at the priorities for last year, 1920, I think one of the things that I'd want to pull out is the implementation of signs of safety, obviously within child protection conferences and minutes. And obviously this was identified within the Ofsted report in June 19 and serious case reviews. And I think one of the things from our perspective is that this has been implemented wholesale. It's been very positive, both in terms of participation from partners, but also in terms of positive feedback from parents regarding the notes that and the plans that are now given to them. Just moving on to the life links, again, the family finder approach is being utilised, especially for the calendaring tool, and that's enabling practitioners to explore support networks for the young person to strengthen their support in the future. And again, since April 2019, we've had 22 referrals for life links. Some of the challenges in terms of permanence around looked after reviews is that we'd identified that there had been some levels of variable practice within progressing plans for permanence. However, that hadn't resulted in any delay. So work has been done with the independent chairs in terms of challenge, but also being more succinct in terms of permanent plans. External escalations, again, work has been done with the LCP in terms of a new process that commenced in 2019 for that. So a quarterly email is sent to senior liaison officers to make them aware of any escalations for the areas that they cover. Obviously, any issues in terms of escalations at the point of conference, there is a positive challenge from the Child Protection Conference chairs, but we wanted to ensure that actually service areas were aware of the thematic issues and could respond to those as well as the individual issues. The chairs, excuse me, the chairs in relation to adoption and SGO disruptions, again, this has been very positive. That the independent chairs took on the responsibility of SGO disruptions. They already did adoptions. We'd looked at potentially 4 or 5 meetings a year to address these issues. However, we'd received 19 referrals, so we did a review of the service and what we could provide. And family group conferencing is starting to pick up some of those additional disruption meetings. Feedback, again, feedback from young people is obviously core to our business within the service, both for looked after reviews and child protection conferences. And again, one of the positive things that we're doing is that we always collate feedback from young people. We get the feedback either from the letters that we get sent out, the feedback forms, and also contacting young people. And what we're doing is that we're collating all of that feedback and rank rating it to see how that can make us understand on a more general level the issues that impact on children and families. One of the challenges was in relation to that the young inspectors were due to undertake some qualitative interviews with a number of children in care, but unfortunately due to staffing issues that's had to be postponed. However, some of the independent chairs have done a small amount of qualitative interviews within the time that they've had available. But again, that's one of the things that we want to address for coming year. In terms of more general progress and kind of achievements, the independent chairs continue to attend Children's Services locality team meetings every 6 months. And again, that's been very positive in terms of integrating them, having that discussion backwards and forwards, being able to address any issues, but also getting practice issues across. And we've had 6 monthly meetings again with CAFCAS, and the existing protocol that we have with them has been updated. As a service, we attend the improvements for the regional IRO and CP managers group every quarter. Now, Chris Sharp usually does that. However, she's retiring at the end of this month, so that's something either myself or Debbie Johnson will do in the future. Again, we, as part of our ongoing Partners in Practice, myself, Chris Sharp and Carolyn Knight, in July of 19, went down to Northampton to have a peer review of their safeguarding quality assurance services. And that was a 3-day quality review in which we presented back to them our findings, which again was very good for kind of cross-border work. In terms of the LAC population, again, the number of children in care shows an upward trend. Again, we get a lot of information in relation to that. However, 100% of the looked after reviews have been held in timescales. And again, 100% of young people in care have participated in their reviews in some way, shape or form. Moving on for that, in terms of children's involvement, we obviously, one of our focuses certainly for looked after is to ensure that the looked after reviews engages young people. Now, we have consultations, as I've already mentioned, that goes out to the young people. We also phone young people, email, visit in between meetings, in between reviews, to ensure that as much as possible we can engage the young people to find out how they want their reviews to run. That's meant that a lot of the reviews wouldn't necessarily be classed as traditional. Some of it, we've had examples where a young person's wanted to use musical chairs as part of an ice-breaking session within one of the meetings. We often use sticky notes for them to write down their thoughts and feelings. So it can be very varied, and it's very much dependent on what the young person wants and how they want to participate. Again, looked after plans. The integrated care plan and shares report was launched in the beginning of April 19. Now, there has been some issues with that in terms of difficulties around people completing their steps on Mosaic. Again, that's part and parcel of the review that we're undertaking at the moment to ensure that that this can be undertaken and changes can be made to make this more effective. Majority of concerns raised by the IROs is still through positive challenge, and again, we've altered Mosaic in order to reflect this so that it can be recorded effectively. And in terms of the team itself, it's about improving the consistency of escalations, making sure that the better monitored, there's a reduction in drift and delay, and that the management oversight in terms of this, tracking escalations, remains consistent. So an example of this is that the IROs are sent a weekly reminder of any formal escalations that they currently have open so that they can continue to chase this with the respective teams. In terms of child protection, again, 100% of child protection meetings have been held in timescale, so that's consistently very positive. And chairs continue to undertake monitoring between the midway points between conferences for preparation both with reviews, but also to ensure that statutory tasks have been undertaken and there is progress with the child family. For any children and families that are reaching the 12-month child protection, 12-month child protection plan, that there is a separate meeting that we undertake with the team manager, social worker, and those involved to have a review of progress and see if there's anything that needs to be changed. Again, escalations, as you will have seen from the report, has been reviewed through the LSCP, which I've mentioned, and a quarterly email is now sent to the senior liaison officers to make them aware of escalations raised in terms of their staff or any particular issues that were happening with their service area. And again, the figures relate to the period of April 19 to March 20. There's been 325 escalations compared to 284 the previous year. And again, that's about making sure that escalations are captured and raised in the appropriate forum. I think the primary goal as I've kind of touched on in terms of the escalations, is making sure that the SLOs are aware of that within their agencies so that they can address it that might be thematic within their service areas so that we can deal with those as a whole. Obviously, there are recommendations in terms of the priorities for 2021. I don't propose to go through those, obviously, unless there's any questions, because they're kind of readily apparent. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the report. So obviously, if there are any questions or any further detail that anybody wants, I'll answer it as I can.
Thank you, Paul. I'm sure you will. I've got a question, but I'll first of all allow members to ask questions. So I'm going to ask Councillor Ferreton-Williams, are there any members who indicated the wish to speak, please?
Councillor Whittington has indicated to speak. I've got a question, but I'm happy to have my question after you, Chairman. It's up to you.
Okay, well, we'll go you second then. We'll go to Mark first. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Paul, for a very very in-depth report. Just a couple of things to want to pick up on. During the presentation, you talked about some potentially sort of issues with the engagement of parents in the process. I'm just wondering what we can kind of do to to encourage parents to become more involved in the process. So that would be my first thing. And the second one, at several points in the report, it refers to the mental health aspect of young people, and I know this is a sort of an area that is, really being identified now as being fairly key. And this kind of links into a question I'm going to ask a bit later on COVID. Potentially, I was in health scrutiny yesterday, and we were received a report from the Lincolnshire Partnership Trust on mental health issues, and they were saying that they think that the impact of the current lockdown in terms of mental health issues might not be played out for a full 10-year period, because you've got a lot of people in social isolation and whatever. I'm just wondering potentially how our young people might be being affected, how their mental health may be being affected by the present lockdown. Potentially what support we could offer for the going forward. I was going to talk about Section 44 visits and how you can do a Section 44 visit during lockdown, but I'll probably have to ask that question relating to the next item. So that's a bit of prep for who's able to answer the question.
That's me again, so I'll be able to answer that after that.
So, yeah, I'll ask the COVID question now since I raised it. Obviously, this report goes up to the end of March this year. Lockdown hadn't really kicked in. Just when you answer just a bit of information as to how you are trying in the present difficult circumstances to maintain the service and whatever to ensure everything is being done. In terms of the number of reviews on the table on page, I can't remember now, but you've got a list of number of children and then number of reviews, and the number of reviews is always more than the number of children. So I'm presuming from that every child gets one review every year, but there's some children for whatever reason get more than one. So just a bit of clarity around that. Really pleased that children and young people have been involved in the meetings that we're having. And final question, you referred to the sort of increasing numbers of looked after children, which is obviously an issue, because in an ideal world we wouldn't have any looked after children, but we do, and the numbers are increasing. And I'm just wondering what pressure that's having upon staffing and resources in the team, because obviously there comes a point, if your baseline number of young people looked after goes up, it then does become a resource, both in terms of staffing issues and finance, and also staffing morale as well and process, because I guess the staff want to do the best they possibly can for every looked after child, but it comes down to the caseload and stuff like that and whatever. So just a few comments on that. So that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, that's quite a comprehensive list. So apologies if I miss any. If you do flag that I've not answered any. I'll start with the COVID, because obviously, as you said, the report itself really just comes up to the point where COVID was starting to have an impact. I think one of the things that I would say is that it's not just our service area that's worked incredibly hard to try and manage COVID and the responses to it. It's been obviously all of the services, all of the partners. And again, I would want to flag specifically also our safeguarding and review business support staff that again have been integral in terms of taking this forward. So it's almost been, again, a journey in terms of COVID, because obviously the guidance from the government and the authority has changed as COVID has developed. And obviously we've reflected that in terms of our reviews and conferences. So originally we started restricting obviously the number of people that would be coming to the meetings and having people participating via phone conferencing. Obviously, as the restrictions increased and obviously the social distancing came into effect, we've started having a combination initially of phone conferencing, which again comes with its own difficulties. We've then moved on to Zoom, so it was one of the first groups to start using Zoom conferencing. But again, you can imagine that was a combination of Zoom conferencing, telephone call input, and any other way that we could get, whether it was people's reports or views sent through via email. And then we've moved on to a combination of Zoom and Teams meetings. It's been difficult, to be honest. It has been difficult because one of the biggest issues has been IT, if nothing else, and about how that's progressed and all of the hard work through the authority in terms of making sure that that works and is effective, hence why we're able to do a Teams meeting today. And one of the things I would reflect is that what we've also aimed to do is bring children and families on board with that. So one of the biggest issues that we always face and have to address and ensure we get right is how do we make sure that families can participate within the meetings, whether it's child protection conferences or whether it's the looked after reviews. So in terms of that, one of the things that we'd previously been doing was contacting families prior to conference to make sure that they were aware of what conference was, that they were happy with how it was going to be run. That was pre-COVID, and actually that work has proved really useful in terms of continuing with that, especially around the issues around making sure everybody can participate through the electronic media. One of the other issues that we've kind of addressed is the contact with children and young people, certainly with LAC reviews throughout this process. Now, it's been actually quite positive in some regards. So if we look at there's lots of difficulties in terms of managing that, but one of the positives that we found is that some young people are actually quite keen to participate through electronic media because that's what they're used to. And again, one of the things that we would need to do at the end of the COVID process is actually have a review of how we undertake LAC reviews, certainly, to see how it works for young people, because we have had a positive response in terms of young people often use social media and electronic media as a matter of course. Some of us older members of staff maybe use it a little bit, but we don't live and kind of breathe it. So for some young people, actually, it's been beneficial because they've not had to sit in a room with people around the table. Yes, they can do things differently, but they can pop in and out using social media within a review. So for us, COVID has changed the way that we've had to do things, and I think what we need to do going forward is have that review to make sure that we can take the best bits from what's occurred, but also make sure that we can continue to work effectively within that. So it has been under pressure. It has added to the pressure for staff because, as you can imagine, when people drop out of conversations, when things don't work, when you're having a conversation, suddenly somebody isn't there, certainly with telephones and you don't know about it, it's elongated the process. It hasn't made it quicker. It's better now, but again, it doesn't make conferences quicker. It doesn't necessarily make LAC reviews quicker, which again is one of the things that is a pressure for staff. But at the moment, they're dealing with it and they're managing with the caseload. In terms of reviews, in terms of the number of reviews, looked after reviews going up, as you identified, the number of reviews and the number of children are often at odds. Now, that will be that obviously when a young person comes into care, there is the 28-day review. We would then have another one 3 months after that, and then another one at the 6-month stage. So you can have a number of reviews for any one child or multiple children. Now, if a child is within the court process and is leading towards obviously potentially adoption, there may be a number of additional reviews that's needed to ratify the care plan. So again, that could be in addition to those timescales that I've just mentioned. The flip side of that is, as you also see from the report, the number of child protection conferences has reduced. So although there's additional pressure in one area, it has reduced slightly in another. And again, that linked in with the taking on the work for the SGOs, that the amount of SGO work disruptions that was coming through wasn't something that we had the capacity to undertake. So again, we had to review that to make sure that that was manageable for the staff members. In terms of morale, obviously like any service area, our staff are completely dedicated to the work that they do and getting the best outcomes for the children that they hold. And for a lot of our staff members, they've been the consistent face of children for many, many years. That doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of work, that they don't go above and beyond, because they always do. But certainly I would say that staff morale is always very positive. We have our challenges, as you can imagine, when we have a lot of cases coming through the door and those need to be allocated. It is challenging for staff, but we take account of that in terms of trying to manage that as best we can, making sure reviews and conferences are local to where that person lives rather than taking time to travel. So it is the managing all of those expectations, but certainly, although we're under pressure like any other service area, it was about us managing that effectively. We talked about mental health, where you addressed the issue about mental health. Again, in part due to COVID, mental health of children, mental health of parents. Again, part and parcel of the challenge for the independent reviewing officers and child protection conferences and obviously for looked after reviews is to ensure that services are in place for children and families and hold partners accountable for that. And one of the things that we've done, again, for our staff is ensure, certainly around their training, that they're up to speed in terms of adult mental health and children's mental health, so that when they're challenging, they're coming from a point of knowledge and informed practice, which again is part and parcel of the process of making sure that services are relevant and put in place in a timely manner for children, as well as being able to challenge partner agencies effectively, to escalate help where necessary, and obviously take it to the LSCP in terms of wider concerns. I think in terms of children within COVID, again, there's almost two elements. There's the child protection conferences, where obviously that challenge comes through the social worker in terms of how is the family managing, how are the young people coping, how is the risk being managed, is that being managed effectively, are they visiting within the COVID restrictions in terms of being a priority and a high risk. Obviously for looked after children, again, it's about liaising with the foster carers or whether it's the residential homes and the children themselves to ensure that actually mental health isn't deteriorating, and if there are issues, that they're being supported effectively throughout this period. So again, for our staff members, it's very much a challenge, making sure that things are being done or not being done, putting pressure, exerting a challenge either with them individually, with their practice supervisors or their line managers, and ultimately escalating the issue if required. So again, it's very difficult because obviously, you know, for a lot of the IROs, they do have positive relationships with young people, so young people often speak to them, but it is working through partners, through family, through the carers to ensure that that's being addressed. Parents, I think, involved in the process, I think this might have been the last one. One of the things, again, that we do is that throughout all of the processes that we undertake, we do seek feedback from parents, both so on a child protection, the conferences that we do there, that from the child protection conferences, obviously we seek feedback from parents after the meetings, as I suggested that we contact parents before the meetings to make sure everything's going fine. We have limited capacity through our business support to do post-conference checks with parents, where we might receive feedback for them to ring parents directly to see how they felt about the conference, about how they felt engaged with the process. And again, that's one of the things that individually we get that feedback, but going forward, we need to collate that more effectively. And that's one of the things as a service that we recognise. I don't know if that's covered everything. Hopefully it has. If I've missed anything, please tell me.
No.
I think it's covered most of it.
I got most. I'll go with most of it.
Very answers. I mean, certainly, just one comment. Certainly, as somebody who's a parent of an adopted child, certainly we found that with our son that whatever we were doing, whether it was a review conference or a court date or whatever it was, we found that it actually works by getting it into his mind well in advance. So a month or so before, you'd say, oh, you've got a court, we're going to court in a month's time on this date, or we're having, or you're meeting your social worker today or whatever, we're having a case review on this day. Just so, rather than just drop it on them, because that's the worst thing you can do, especially, you know, with a looked after child, in my opinion, because there's a lot of uncertainty in their minds, and you need to kind of support them through the process. But also post support is also quite important, because it's quite a traumatic event for a young, you know, for certainly we found, and there's almost has to be some pastoral aftercare you know, as parents that we did, because quite often in a case or when a child's history is being discussed, the child, it may trigger in the child a memory or something or that's happened there, and so quite often it can be sort of, it won't manifest itself until several days or maybe several weeks after the event. So it's great that there is that sort of feedback afterwards of parents. So an issue does especially crop up maybe 2-3 weeks, even a month after the event, that there's still the ability for the parents to feed that back, because certainly we found that was really important. And every child is individual, every child is unique, and they're going to respond and react to stuff that's happening to them in different ways. But thanks, Paul, for those answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Cleo, you wanted to comment.
Yes, it was just a question. I think you sort of covered it with Mark's, but it was more about the young inspectors themselves, in terms of what support do they get if they need any, or do they enjoy doing the job they do? That sort of, just a bit more about them, I suppose.
I suppose I'm not going to dip out of that answer, but to a degree, I think one of the things that we do is obviously for the young inspectors, that falls within Ben Lilly's kind of remit, but obviously I manage along with Chris Sharp, the independent reviewing officers. Now, I think one of the things that I would say is that we utilise the young inspectors as much as we possibly can. Now, one of the things that we would acknowledge is that, yes, we've got a group of staff that is very experienced. Some of those staff have known those children for a very long time. Some of those staff are older staff. and might not be able to relate to young people in maybe a different fashion or a way that they would want to. And so for us, what we always consider is who's best placed to gather the information from the young person. So sometimes it would be us, sometimes it would be that relationship that they have with the independent reviewing officer. Sometimes it might be through the social worker, it might be through the carer, it might be through the young inspectors who obviously are more of their kind of age range. And one of the things that when we're asking the young inspectors to do a piece of work for us, obviously we speak to Ben Lilly, we speak to Katrina Hewitt, who essentially has oversight for them in terms of exactly what we want, but also what support, if any, that the young inspectors are going to need around that. So for us, it's very much a kind of collaborative approach because, again, we work, as I said, we work through who's best placed to gather that information rather than thinking that we can do everything, but equally making sure that they're protected and informed. So maybe an example
I think that's answered. I was going to say, I think you're right in terms of, I think that's answered my question. So yeah, thank you very much for that. That's good. I'm pleased to hear that, to be honest.
Thank you, Cleo. Yeah, it is reassuring to know, isn't it, that we've had these reports today, Paul, and you've just given this one, and it's apparent in the authority that we work with other teams and other departments and other people, and it's a question of, well, we do this and you do that. We all work together, and it's who is the best person to actually deal with it. And that actually covers a question that I was going to ask, and I'm delighted for that. I think the one problem we have, it's an unknown, is the current situation and the impact that's going to have on mental health, and that in many ways it's an unknown to most of us, but it's something that we are absolutely aware of. So what I'm going to do, Paul, thank you very much for that report and the questions that you gave there.
Councillor Brailsford, it's
yes.
Janice. Could I just add something
Yes,
in
Janice.
terms of the mental health? We've just agreed to participate in some research with Bristol University that is going to undertake a longitudinal study of children's emotional wellbeing and care. So we will get a baseline between August, September and October, and then they will be looking at that periodically over time. So we'll be able to have a kind of benchmark where we are, what sort of, and they were very impressed actually with the support around emotional wellbeing and mental health that we currently provide in Lincolnshire. So it was just kind of probably alert the panel to that, and we will be able to provide you with an update as the research progresses.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Janice, yeah. Thank you for that, Janice. I
It's just
aware.
literally hot off the press. I just agreed it last week.
Right. Well, it must have been last week. I did know that Bristol University was doing some research on this, but I didn't know that we were involved in it. So that's brilliant news. And
You know me.
I know now, right off the press. So as soon as we've got some information, Janice, I'm hopeful that you can share that with us, please.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks.
That's
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, well, I don't mind those types of interruption. Thank you very much. Well, we've considered the report, and thank you, Paul, of the Independent Reviewing Service and the priorities. I'm going to propose that we receive the report and endorse the priorities for 2020-2021. And we've had a good range of questions there. Now, does anyone dissent? Please, I'll just pause for a few seconds and I'll keep quiet. No comment, Cleo. I'm going to say that report is agreed. Thank you very much for that. So moving on to item 12, the Regulation 44 Independent Visiting Service Annual Report. I do know, Paul, you're going to get a question about Section 44 visits on this. Put a note of that. Yes, the report provides the panel with an update of the work of the independent visitor, and the report will be introduced by Paul Fisher. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you again, Chairman. Again, I'll just do this the same as I did for the last report. I've just pulled out some of the kind of positive working and also the challenges from the report. Really just to let you know that in terms of the independent inspections, that we've had one of our independent officers, Cheryl Govier. She started picking up the inspections, and she's currently shadowing and looking at those in the current situation. And we've also, actually this month of July, had Richard Stone, who was practice supervisor, seconded over to the service, and again he's going to be picking up the inspections. Esther Burleg is stepping away from that. So in terms of the visitors themselves, that they've continued to observe ship handovers, to meetings, key worker sessions, to have further insight into the practice within the homes. They've also conducted weekend visits and different days and different times, also around festive events, in order to ensure that they cover all of the dynamics that you find within all of the individual care homes. And again, as you'll probably be aware, the inspections can be either announced in terms of we said will come down on a particular date and time, or they can be unannounced, so we just turn up. The visitors, one of the things we're also been always very keen about is the independent visitors speak to the individual stakeholders. Again, following on from our last discussion around making sure that it's a partnership approach, so what's the different views of the different stakeholders, and that obviously includes partner agencies, young people, parents, social workers, etc. The visitors have reported that the implementation of signs of safety across the authority is working well. It's being implemented and embedded very positively. Again, there's been progress around social pedagogy and restorative practice, and that's reflected within the reports that they produce around the individual homes. And the different homes are at different stages in terms of implementation, as you would expect, and different levels of embedment and growing confidence in promoting the practice. They've also attended one of the home managers meeting, and again, they felt that that was a positive contribution to be able to promote thematic issues that they're finding. Whether it's around issues of concern or whether it's positive practice that they're seeing. The visitors were intending to plan to attend training for Reg 44 officers, so countrywide training in relation to this, but unfortunately the COVID-19 pandemic put a stop to that. It is due to be rescheduled, so once that has been rescheduled, they'll then link in with this countrywide training, just so that they can pick up in terms of positive practice and work issues from other areas. Again, reflecting back from what I said in the last presentation, the voice of the child, the homes are very good at promoting communication between staff and young people, and that's one of the things that's been drawn through the reports. All of the homes continue to promote display boards that celebrate the voice of the child, the You Said We Did, the chill and chat sessions, so that children and families have an opportunity to feedback in terms of how they're finding the care. There has been some challenges for some of the homes in terms of recruitment and staffing levels, and it's been clear from the homes that obviously, as you would expect, a permanent management and staff team is a foundation for effective quality of care for the homes. However, obviously the homes have responded to that very well. So again, I wouldn't usually pick out some of the individual homes. However, Albion Street, the Beacon in particular, have done very well in terms of recruiting predominantly new staff teams and staff members, with an emphasis on training and developing their confidence, so that there's a consistency of care across the board for the children. And all of the homes are able to evidence multi-agency partnership working and the contributions of health, police, social care, schools within their environment. And again, this is reflected in terms of making sure that they are part of the community within which they live, as well as drawing in partners from wider afield. Again, there are pressures in terms of the nationwide lockdown, both in terms of care and educational work with the children. And again, the reports from the visitors is that actually the homes are responding very positively towards this, either in terms of educational provision themselves, or actually ensuring that obviously as being vulnerable children that they access mainstream provision. Some of the challenges that we kind of have is that, and this is reflective on us as a service, is that getting the written reports completed in a timely manner. Now, all of the inspections are done within the month. However, due to sometimes around sickness absence, sometimes around caseload, other priorities, that we have had issues in terms of making sure that those are then presented to the homes manager and the head of service in a timely way. We have addressed this in terms of prioritising the Reg 44 visits and also the write-ups of the reports and making sure that they're done within enough time. So if there are any issues, another Reg 44 officer can step in and do the inspection. Obviously, from the home's point of view, the need to accommodate some young people at short notice does add additional complexity to the dynamics of the groups within the homes. But again, that is addressed by the homes effectively, even though it is challenging for both for the staff and for the young people. And in terms of recruitment, as I've already identified, that the staff are making great, the homes are making great strides in terms of recruiting, working with HR to review the recruitment process, use of media, use of advertisements to attract interest within the roles. So that's, again, another bit of a whistle-stop tour, but if there's any questions, and I know there was a question of COVID, so I don't know if Councillor Whittington wants to ask that question or whether you want me to just answer that.
Mark, do you want to come in first? Because I know you've got a question on section 44 visits, and then I'll go to Cleo, see if there's anyone else.
It was the first sort of thing was, you know, obviously I've done section 43 in the past, and you know, you go in the units, and because you're actually in the unit, you can talk to the staff and you get a sense of the physical layout of the place, and you can see how the staff and the young people are relating to each other, you know, and you get a feel about a place, don't you? Yeah. You pick up it's body language, it's positive vibes about a place, which I guess if you do stuff virtually, it's a lot harder to get that. You know, obviously you've got the barrier of the technology, and you probably can ask questions and chat and whatever. And related to that is potentially the voice of the child. I'm just wondering how in a COVID situation, children in the units, how they could sort of get their voices across, because you know what I mean, and this question again, which is kind of related to that. I did section 43 at the Econ in Grantham. Obviously, the young people in there have got special needs, and very much when you talk to the staff there, you know they say that, you know, staff, especially children, especially with autism, those kind of needs need a very, very structured, regulated life, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but change is difficult for them to deal with. And obviously COVID's going to, I guess, has presented an awful lot of challenges to how their lives are being structured, because potentially, you know, things are changing because of COVID. So I'm just wondering what we can kind of do to sort of help those particular young people with specific needs. And I'm really pleased at the Beacons, because I know when I as guys staffing, because I know that because of the nature of the unit, you have to have staff with special skills and whatever, a lot of training involved. So I'm really pleased that they're up to staff, and it looks like the unit is fully open. But it's all kind of related around COVID, and the fact that virtual meetings are great, but you lose the physical nature of seeing the place. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Paul, before you answer that, I'm just keen that other members who may wish to ask us questions. So if you can make a note of the issues that Mark's raised. Cleo, is there any other member that wishes to ask any questions, please?
No other member has indicated to speak.
Okay, well, I'll come back to you later in case, but over to you then, Paul, please.
Okay, I think just in terms of the difficulties under COVID, I will just make note that just so you know my situation, that I've been obviously the team manager for the independent chairs, and I managed or have managed up until recently the Reg 44 visitors. However, I've been seconded over to open the new children's home Wickenby and have been the manager there. And obviously since that point, I've not managed the Reg 44 officers. However, I can tell you that that gives me a very unique insight into being on the receiving end of the Reg 44 inspections and how robust they are from a different perspective. So I think we have to acknowledge that absolutely there's always difficulties in terms of doing it remotely. One of the things that I would say is that the independent visitors are there as critical friends. So often they build up very good relationships with both the managers, the staff and the children, and the children will know exactly who they are, and obviously the staff would introduce themselves. So they do have those relationships and those dynamics. Obviously, in terms of having the practicalities in terms of visiting, obviously that's not been able to go ahead, as you're probably all aware. So it has been done virtually. Now, I would admit to, completely agree that you don't get the same sense as you would being in a building, doing it virtually through a Zoom or Teams kind of conference call. However, I think it's about making it as effective as it can be within the current situation. So again, having had personal experience of this in relation to this, I know the independent visitors still go through the same process in terms of all of the documents that they need to see scanned and sent through beforehand. So for Wickenby, I've just had my, again, visits yesterday. So all of the information is scanned and sent through to the independent visitor prior to the day. So they have all of that information available. Obviously, they can request sight of any other information that they need to, which they do. Again, the inspection itself is conducted through Teams or Zoom or phone, which is more useful and available, and still includes all of those people that you would ordinarily see. So it includes the children, if the children are willing and want to participate in that process. And again, the feedback from the independent visitors has been that actually children do want to do that. It will then, obviously, they'll observe certain areas of work. So they will observe a team handover. They might observe some sessions with the young people or work that's being done. They'll speak to members of staff, again, privately and independently. They'll speak to the managers as well. So if I take the example of Wickenby again, which obviously we had yesterday, I took the independent visitor on a virtual tour of the building via WhatsApp. So we had a bit of a tour around so that they could see exactly what was going on, what was on the notice boards. Saw the young people again, they did that via Zoom in terms of speaking to them. I'll say sat, but they virtually sat in the team handover meetings and then spoke to the staff afterwards. I then engaged in terms of a session of obviously answering the questions afterwards, again independently, and they were then going to speak to other members of staff that weren't on shift via telephone call to ensure again that their views were kind of sought, as well as other partners, so social worker in the school as well. So I think it's about ensuring that there is that combination of trying to gather as much information as you possibly can through the different media, whether it's written information, whether it is through the social media. And again, from my experience from being the other end of it, I can absolutely attribute that the questions that the independent visitors have are incredibly robust and very probing in terms of being that critical friend, but actually getting to understand exactly what's going on and being able to reflect the situation within the home. So again, there are challenges, and I think as well, Councillor Whittington, there are those particular issues that you would get from somewhere like the Beacon or Haven or Strutt in terms of those young people that aren't ordinarily able to articulate necessarily their views. And ordinarily the visitors would sit with the children. They might not be able to communicate in all instances effectively directly, but they can do that through the staff. So it does become more problematic. But again, in response, I suppose, to the staff, because it is really about the staff and the staff care and how they respond to the children, it is then working through the staff also to gain the views of the young people and making sure that they're doing it in an effective way whilst we're in COVID lockdown. So I would say, yes, it's not by any means ideal. However, I think it's really positive work that everybody's doing to ensure that they're as meaningful as can be possible within the current environment.
Thank you, Paul. That's yeah, I think that's quite thorough. Cleo, did anyone else wish to ask any questions?
I actually have a question that I completely forgot to ask. So yes, I do. I looked at the report, and I used to visit Northholme as a councillor visitor. And it was I always found it absolutely fantastic and fabulous. And I was just reading the report, and obviously Northholme is now good, and there's obviously a section that currently says requires improvement to be good, and the previous judgment was outstanding. Is this because of the police issue, or do you know why they've suddenly dropped? It just concerns me because I sort of haven't I feel like I have an invested interest because I thought it was really good, basically.
I think I would probably bring Yvonne in on this, because obviously, although I've kind of got oversight, I to be honest, without going through all of the back reports, I wouldn't be able to say specifically what the areas were. So I don't know whether Yvonne, if you can add anything to that specifically.
There was a specific issue, Cleo, which the Ofsted had picked up on. And I think my recollection is it was to do with bullying, and it was to do with the paperwork, the evidence not having been completed in order to demonstrate that had been properly addressed.
Okay.
The home has not changed since you've been there. In fact, if anything, they've become much more therapeutic in their outlook. They're just working on their getting their caring to learn certificate. Jeanette has a full complement of staff. We've got a lovely bunch of kids in there. Really nice. The staff are very engaged with the kids. So if you went in, you wouldn't notice anything. But we know what the rules are, and we weren't ready for Ofsted, and now we have to take that hit.
No, okay. Thank you very much. That's given me a bit of confidence.
Thank you, Cleo. I've got one question. It's probably one you want to answer, Paul, and my officers may come in. As we're coming out of lockdown, and it's recently been announced that relatives can visit care homes again, which is great news. We would like to get back to doing physical meetings, obviously, and visiting members likewise. Have we had any indication from central government as to when that might be? Because children are expected to go to school in September. What is the feedback? Do we have that? This is open to other officers. Do we have any feedback when we may be able to do those meetings and resume normal service?
Again,
yeah, go on. Sorry, I might be better placed to answer that one for you, David. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. What we are doing is we are, in terms of our children's homes, in fact, in terms of all of our children who are looked after, not just in our children's homes, but across the whole of all of our kids that are looked after, regardless of where they are looked after, we are looking at reinstating family time. What in terms of our children's homes, though, we are very mindful, and our foster carers, we're very mindful that if a child picks up an infection and takes that back with them, that could spread very quickly. We want to minimise that risk. So what we are doing is we are socially distancing. We're encouraging the children to socially distance, and we're encouraging for family time to take place outside of the home environment. That way we limit the number of people who've got social distancing and outside of the home environment, because obviously we've got the track and trace as well that's going to be coming in. So there's a whole we've spoken very with public health in order to make sure that we've got this right.
Okay, thanks for that, Yvonne. I think we're all frustrated at this, but we have to stay safe, and that is going to be our number one priority. So thank you. Thank you for that, Yvonne. And again, Paul, thank you for that report. To members, if there are no other people wishing to speak, we've considered the independent visiting service report and made comments. I'm going to propose that we receive the report. Is anyone else wishing to speak, or does anyone wish to dissent? Otherwise, I'm going to accept that report. So I'll just pause for a moment, please. Well, being very polite today, aren't they? Okay. Well, Paul, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the questions. You've got quite a few there, and I think you know, it's congratulations. You're doing very well, and yeah, I think it's generally good news. So thank you for that. Okay.
Thanks very much, Chair.
We're now moving on to the next item of the agenda, and I've almost lost count, but I think it's item 13. We're invited to review, consider and comment on the work programme as set out in the report and highlight for discussion any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration on the work programme. So I'm going to pass over to, I think, Rachel on this one. So if you're there, Rachel, it's over to you.
I think it's over to Daniel.
Daniel.
Thank you, Chairman. The work programme is on page 138. I'll keep it brief. We've got the next meeting on the 17th of September, and the items there, 7 items listed on page 138. And then following on from that, we'll meet again on the 19th of November. Again, another nicely packed agenda there, 6 items for the panel to review. So if there are any comments, then I'm happy to take those.
Thank you, Daniel. Claire, any comments on that from any of the members, please?
No, everyone has remained silent.
Okay. Just before we move on from that then, Daniel, I'm just going to ask Janice, you mentioned Bristol University a few moments ago and the work that they're doing in conjunction with us. September may be too soon, but will we be able to have an update going forward on how that work is progressing? Please.
Yes. I think when we have our next pre-meeting, we could look at agenda and put it on the agenda then. I think it is too soon in September.
Yeah,
but certainly, maybe the following meeting might be.
I agree. So yes, well, you'll be involved in that, Daniel, in the pre-meet. So it would be good if we could get it in certainly as soon as possible, but not too soon, obviously. Okay.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to ask members if we can approve that work programme. I'm going to just pause for a few moments, see if there is dissent. Otherwise, I'm going to say that we agree the work programme. Very well behaved meeting today. Congratulations. No one seems to be dissenting, so we'll agree that item. Now, that concludes the business of the meeting. I would like to thank everyone for your attendance today. You may now leave the meeting by using the red phone icon on the taskbar to end the call. And thank you very much, and look forward to meeting you all on September the 17th.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thanks.